I'm the last speaker of the morning here, so bear with me here. Before I joined the Energy Futures Lab in May this year, I had a great job. It was a great organization, meaningful. You got to sit tight for the story, my friend. But something went wrong. Something was wrong. Honestly, when I read the news and I looked at that daily flow of analysis on climate change in Alberta, I was always left with an extremely unsettled feeling. On a daily basis, it felt as though I was blasted with this never-ending flow or barrage of information on oil, gas, and climate. And that information was used to support two dominant yet conflicting narratives. One largely Alberta-based narrative that tells the story of decarbonization, energy security, high regulatory standards, and the challenges associated with a simplistic approach to decarbonization. And another narrative that warns of climate catastrophe and the urgent withdrawal of capital from Alberta. What I struggled with most, though, was that the information that was being used to support these two narratives was actually quite compelling to me. And not unlike this slide, there's just far too much of it, and it's coming at me far too fast to really make sense of it. And on the social media side, of course, it's wrapped in ethics. One side is suggesting that Ottawa is trying to ruin Alberta and our children's future. The other side suggests, well, Alberta is trying to ruin the world and our children's futures. So what does the future have in store for our children here in Alberta? Should we be optimistic or should we be terrified about what this energy transition means and the impact on our great province? Some days I think I would waffle from one to the other. But what about the Albertans who are not necessarily as immersed in the energy system as we are here in this room today? To what extent are they experiencing this uncertainty? And is this leading to some form of political angst? It feels as though Alberta is at a crossroads. We're asked to support one of two drastically different policy responses to this flurry of information. We're asked to either support the status quo production of hydrocarbons and to acknowledge the security and the prosperity that they bring, and to point the finger at others. Or we're asked to take climate action and shut down our oil and gas sector and our economy immediately. And this is, I'm sorry to say for an overly technical term here, but both of these options suck. And that's why I gravitated to the Energy Futures Lab, because of their belief in the radical middle and their realization that this toxic debate, as well as the flip-flop, seesaw nature of our policy environment, was only serving to harm us. So 2 years ago, the Energy Futures Policy Collaborative, they came together out of concern for this divisive conversation about oil and gas in Canada. They suggested that with smarter policy, our climate ambitions and energy prosperity do not have to be at odds. They received guidance from an Indigenous Advisory Committee. And we have this excellent quote here from Mark Podlasley, and I think he really, really nailed it, because the energy transition is the moonshot of our generation. And Mark challenges us to reframe the debate and to ask different questions, because we could come up with better policy solutions than what we have been presented with thus far. So the Policy Collaborative, they set out to explore what could be a middle path for both Alberta and Canada based on this concept of FutureFit Hydrocarbons. And that's why I'm in front of you here today, is because I feel quite passionately that if we follow this concept of FutureFit Hydrocarbons, we can satisfy the interests of Indigenous communities, of financial markets, of the rest of Canada, our friends in Quebec, and of course, Albertans. So what are these FutureFit hydrocarbons? I have a definition here. Don't worry, I'm going to unpack this just a little bit so it makes some sense. Let's start with why would we build upon oil and gas assets? I think Kevin Krausert, he said it best when he said, if you look at any energy transition, the simplest, cheapest, and fastest way of accomplishing it is to use existing energy infrastructure in some new way. The slowest, most complicated, and most expensive way of doing it is to invent a whole new energy system. And this is why the Policy Collaborative believes we need to repurpose our assets and this immense wealth of oil and gas assets. So what are these assets? It's the energy infrastructure, it's the human expertise, it's the supply chains, it's our world-class construction sector, and of course it's the natural resource itself, if we do not emit its carbon. It would be a tragedy if we were to squander this immense wealth of assets, because they can act as a massive competitive advantage for us as we get a head start on a new suite of economic diversification opportunities. FutureFit Hydrocarbons does include net zero oil and gas, but considering the expected decrease in demand for these two products over the coming decades, it's important that it includes more. So our community of fellows and partners over the years have identified a series of prime economic opportunities where we can repurpose our assets and to produce the products that the future demands. They include carbon capture and storage, low carbon hydrogen, geothermal, bitumen beyond combustion, battery materials, among more other opportunities. So how about what it means to competitively position the province? The public alone will not be able to fund the billions of dollars in infrastructure investment that's required to transform our energy economy. We need to deploy private capital. And that was the primary concern of this policy collaborative, that Alberta's oil and gas sector risks being excluded from this future investment. There are massive pools of investment that are taking shape out there, sustainable finance investment, and trillion-dollar funds. We need to fiercely compete for these funds. And we believe that activity aligned with this concept of FutureFit Hydrocarbons will not only help attract these funds, but it will help position the province as a capital for transition finance. And finally, what do we mean by future energy system? A new set of rules are governing our energy industry. Yes, we have been playing this game for decades and we've been playing it quite well, but the referee has a new rule book. All of a sudden, net zero commitments have become table stakes just to play the game. Access to capital now hinges on robust disclosure. Indigenous inclusion has become a determining factor for whether or not a project will proceed with the necessary financing. To put it simply, investor expectations will continue to evolve. The rule book is going to continue to evolve, and this concept of FutureFit Hydrocarbons could act as a playbook for Alberta as we continue to try and strive to meet these evolving investor expectations. But to unlock the potential for FutureFit Hydrocarbons in this province, public funding of specific technologies, it's going to be important, but it's not going to be enough. So the collaborative, they developed a roadmap for policymakers, which helps government create an enabling environment for FutureFit Hydrocarbons to grow and to thrive. But let's be clear here though, FutureFit Hydrocarbons are not some new way for us to tell our story or to reinforce the status quo. They entail meaningful commitments to match the interests of investors and what is most important to Albertans and Canadians. So as a proud Albertan and Canadian, I'm actually quite excited about this concept and the fact that it could be a new narrative for Canada. It could help reframe the debate around Canada's energy transition. If we get this right, not only can we connect Alberta's oil and gas sector to this transition finance as it decarbonizes, but we could also help mend a fraying health of our confederation. FutureFit Hydrocarbons can be a new frontier for Alberta's energy system, our economy, and they could set a new standard for the world to look up to. So if any of this seems appealing to you and you've yet to read the report, I ask you please consider downloading it today and have a look. Also consider participating in our December 13th webinar on economic reconciliation as well as FutureFit Hydrocarbons. And finally, if you find any of this compelling, please consider how you in this room as a system actor can potentially work with us to be an agent for change. That sounds pretty intimidating, but it can be as simple as adopting the language with your colleagues in the kitchen at work. Or it can be sharing the report with a stakeholder. Or it could be joining me after this session here in the open space just to have an interesting conversation about this concept. So I really appreciate your time hearing me out today. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the event.